Okay, bonjour. So, we're back again with some more things about tenses, and this is aimed really at year 8 and above. Year 9 and year 10 definitely need to be able to talk about the perfect tense. And last week we were dealing with some more simple tenses, whereas this one is slightly more complicated, so we need to listen really carefully to this. So today we're talking about what's called the perfect tense, which is the main past tense, and we'll just have a quick chat about what that means. So the perfect tense, the reason it's called the perfect tense is because the Latin word for perfect means something that's completed. So it's a completed action. So for example, if it was in English, we could say, yesterday I played football. Last weekend I went to the cinema. This morning I ate my breakfast. Those are all actions that are completed and done with. This is a past tense. Very, very important in order to be able to get a good grade in French. You must be able to say some things in the past tense. This is one of the past tenses, the perfect tense. Something that's happened recently. So, let me just go into this straightforward. Essentially, there are two parts we need to form the past tense. So I'll have a look at the first one, and then we'll come back to the second part in a minute. So the first part is we need to decide between two verbs. We can either start off our sentence with j'ai, or we can start off our sentence with je suis. Now, first of all, we should all really know what those words mean on their own. We know what j'ai means, and we know what je suis means. But just in this instance for today, I'd like you to sort of forget what those words mean for now. Really, we're just going to look at them meaning I, because this is the way the French and lots of other languages, in fact, they form their past tense by using these two verbs. So even though j'ai and je suis have their own meaning when they're used on their own, when they're used with the past tense, we just need to sort of think about them meaning I. Now we need to decide between these two verbs. Now what we can't do is we can't get up one morning and think, oh, today is a j'ai day. I'm going to say j'ai all day long today. J'ai this and j'ai that and j'ai this and j'ai that. It doesn't work that way. There's certain rules that we have to have a think about. So the first thing I'm going to focus on, I'm going to focus on this je suis part. So if we start our sentence with je suis, if the verb is on this castle diagram. Now you might have seen this before, I'm not sure, but this is a diagram to use with we start our sentences with je suis. Now we could stop the video here and have a think about what do these verbs have in common, because you need at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, you need to remember which verbs are on this list. It's very important that we get them right. So we start our sentences with je suis for all the verbs on that diagram. Have a think about what they all have in common. I'm not talking about the spelling of the words at all, I'm talking about their meaning. Let me just go through them actually and we'll have a think. So on the left we've got partir, to leave, and arriver, to arrive. We've then got entrer, to go in or to enter, sortir, to go out or to exit. We've got descendre, to come down or go down, or monter, to go up. And we've got venir, to come from somewhere, and aller, to go somewhere. We've also got tomber, to fall down or fall from somewhere. We've got revenir and retourner, which both really sort of mean to come back or to return. And then we've got a few little weird ones that are on this list. We've got rester in the bottom right corner, it means to stay. And then in the middle we've got mourir, which is the verb to die, and we've got the verb naître, which is the verb to be born. So what do they all have in common? Well, they have a few things in common. Some common answers I normally get are things like, well, a lot of them are opposites of each other, which they are. Partir, to leave, arriver, to arrive. So very often they're opposites of each other. But what I'm really looking for is I'm looking for the idea that they're all involving movement, a large amount of movement from one place to another. So for example, if you are leaving from somewhere, you're leaving from the castle and he's going somewhere else. And the soldier with the axe he's arriving from somewhere. He's come from somewhere and he's arriving at the castle. So he's come quite a long distance, from a long way. It's not just a short distance. So for example, if you're playing football on a football pitch, that does involve movement, but it doesn't involve a large amount of movement from one place to another. Once you finish the match, you walk off the pitch. You haven't gone anywhere. You're still in the same place that you were before when you arrived at the pitch. There's also, again, just to talk about a few other things, rester, the verb to stay, that doesn't involve movement, but it's just it's just an opposite of the verb to go, so that's why it's on the list. And then the two at the top, mourir, to die, and naître, to be born, don't really involve movement, but if you think about it, there is a change of state going on. If you're dying, then you're going from being in this world to not being in this world. So maybe you can think about your soul, which is going up to heaven perhaps. And if you're being born, again, you're going from not being in the world on your own to being alive in the world. So you're moving from one place to another, really. So that's what all these verbs have in common. They have movement involved, and it's really important we try and remember those verbs. Another way to remember it, if a picture isn't for you, then another way to remember it is by using this mnemonic, which is Dr. and Mrs. Van der Tramp. So what we've done here is we've put the letters, by the way, these are all the same verbs on that list as the one we've just seen on the Casa diagram. What we've done is we put the first letter of each word into a mnemonic, which basically spells out Dr. and Mrs. Van der Tramp. So if the diagram doesn't really work for you in your learning style, you could use this. This might help you a little bit more. Devenir, rentrer, monter, retourner, sortir, venir, aller, naître, descendre, entrer, revenir, tomber, rester, arriver, mourir, partir. Those are the verbs which follow je suis. So if you want to say any of those things, if you want to say, for example, where you went, aller, you would say je suis allé. If you want to say you fell over yesterday, you would say je suis tombé. So these are all je suis verbs. Again, you can probably go on YouTube and find possibly a few songs might help you to remember these verbs, but you need to sit down, you need to write these verbs down, and you need to sit down, you need to learn them off by heart, which verbs go with je suis. So those verbs go with je suis, and the rest, don't worry, I'm going to explain all of this in the future. We're going to do some examples, explain it all to you so you understand it. But those verbs we've just seen, they all start with je suis, and the rest of the verbs, so that's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of verbs, they start their sentence with j'ai. So for example, if you want to say I played football, or I watched television, or I listened to music, then we would start our sentence with j'ai, because all those activities, those three I've just mentioned, played, watched, listened, they don't involve movement, and so therefore you would start with j'ai. So the idea is just to go over that again. If it involves movement, if it's on the Casa diagram, then you would start your sentence with je suis. If it doesn't involve movement, you start your sentence with j'ai. Let's have a look at some examples in a minute. Now, as it says at the top there, just to go through this again, there are two parts. This is the first part. J'ai or je suis is the first part. What we need next is something called a past participle. Now, we have past participles in English. Maybe you can pause it for a moment and see if you can think of any. Can you think of any past participles? Well, a lot of past participles in English end in ed. So you might say played or listened or watched, for example. But some of them are irregular, like the verb to eat. We don't say eated in English, we say ate. And the verb to go, we don't say goed, we say went. So a lot of them in English end in ed, but some of them don't end in ed, they just are irregular. So that's the next bit that we need. Now this bit I'm going to go through quite quickly because I'm going to show you some examples in a moment. But essentially we create the past participle in a different way. So if it's an ER verb, which remember lots of verbs are in French, we drop off the ER and we add on an E with an accent on the top. So jouer means played. So you would say j'ai joué, I played. Two parts together. The first part j'ai and the second part jouer. The next verb is an RE verb. And if you want to make a past participle out of the verb vendre, for example, you would take off the re and you'd put a u at the end. And I say at this point, if anyone's really confused about taking off the er and taking off the re and putting on different endings, this is why we have to learn it really very well, because last week we talked about present tense where you take off endings and put some other endings on, and here we're also taking off endings and putting some endings on, and if you don't learn them really well, then you're going to get it all confused in your head. So you need to go back and learn as we're going along and make sure it's all nice and solid in your head before you move on to other bits. Otherwise it's just going to get really confusing. Finally, an IR verb. This one, we basically take off the IR and we put the I back on, so we'd say fini. So j'ai fini, I finished. J'ai vendu, I sold. J'ai joué, I played. None of those verbs involve movement, so they're all j'ai verbs. But we also need to be very careful, because just like in English, there are also some past participles that are irregular. So just like eated, we don't say eated, we say ate. They're very regular in French as well. So the same, for example, with the word drink. In English, we don't say drinked, we say drank. And just as that in French, the word to drink is boire, B-O-I-R-E. But the past participle is bu. Oh, I made myself jump then. So bu, B-U, is the past participle of drank, of drink, drank, bu. So it's just something we need to look out for. So let's go over that again, just in case we're not sure. So, if we want to say I played, well, played is a j'ai verb. So that's our first bit, j'ai. We've made a decision, we decided, we have a think about it. Is it a j'ai verb, is it a je suis verb? It wasn't on the castle diagram, so we decided that it's a j'ai verb. And then that at the moment, though, doesn't really mean anything. It just means to play or something. So what we need to do is we take off the er and we add on an e with an accent. J'ai joué in French means I played. So you could say last weekend I played football. Le weekend dernier, j'ai joué au foot. Now just to also pause for a moment and think about that little accent that's there on top of the E. That accent is incredibly important, because if you miss that accent off and you just have J-O-U-E without the accent, then that doesn't mean played, it means simply play. So you would have a sentence like, last weekend I play football, which doesn't really make sense. So it's very important that you put the accent on the top. The accent, in a way, sort of means ud in English, ed, played, for example. So you need the accent on the top. It's very important. Another example of that, this is a je suis verb. So aller is the verb to go, which obviously that involves movement. If you're going to go from here to Spain, then that involves, if you went, from here to Spain, then that involves movement. You have to go on a plane all the way to Spain. That definitely involves movement, and it was on the castle diagram. So this time I've decided it's not a j'ai verb, it's a je suis verb. But the past participle works the same. So we drop off the er and we add on an e with an accent. So je suis allé is how we say I went. One of the golden rules about this as well is that it should always be 3 words in French. In English, I went is just 2 words, whereas in French it should be 3. Je suis allé. And if you've got only 2 words, it means that something's gone wrong. Quite often I see things like just simply je allé, so 2 words, I went, je allé, and people think that means I went, and it doesn't, because in French you have to use this extra word in the middle. Je suis allé, I went. Let's go quickly on to an re verb. So again, this is the verb to sell, and if you're selling something, it doesn't involve a massive amount of movement. So therefore, I've decided that this is not a je suis verb, this is going to be a j'ai verb. And the past participle is I take off the re and I add on a u. So for re verbs, you take off the re and you add on a u. J'ai vendu means I sold. So maybe you sold your bike. J'ai vendu mon vélo. I sold my bike. Finally, for the moment, we've got ir verbs. And again, this is the verb to finish. And I've had to think about it, and I've decided that this is not a je suis verb. It's not on that castle diagram. There's no finishing going on. You don't have to move around to finish. So I've decided that this is a j'ai verb. And to make the past participle, you simply drop off the R. And then you've got j'ai fini, I finished. So you could say, last weekend I finished my homework. Le weekend dernier, j'ai fini mes devoirs. I finished. So that's how we form our past participle. Finally, just to go back to this Casa diagram again, so just to remind you about this diagram, if the verb's on this diagram, we start our sentence with je suis. If it's not on this diagram, we start our sentence with j'ai. Like I said, this is quite complicated, so it really needs you to pay attention. You might have to play this back a few times. Now, just to make this, I don't want to make this bit more complicated, but there is one extra bit to it. If the verb is on the Casa diagram, so if it's a je suis verb, then if you're female, if you're a girl, you have to put an extra E on the past participle. Je suis allé. It's still pronounced allé. We don't ever put an accent on that extra E. But if you're a girl, you should try and remember to put an extra E on the word aller. Now, boys, don't get too happy, start at home thinking, I don't need to do this, so haha. Because if you ever want to talk about someone feminine, like if you want to say my sister went or my mum went, then you would also need to put the E on the end, because your sister and your mum are female and they need an extra letter on the end. Okay, so we're going to have a go at some little exercises now. I'm going to talk you through it. This might help us. If you've been struggling so far, this might help you to have a go and get these right. So first of all, I want to think about I danced. Now the way we do these exercises, obviously I think I'd like you to pause these in a moment and you need to try and get a dictionary. You can use an online dictionary or a real book dictionary, and you need to look up these verbs. Otherwise you won't really be able to do them. But I danced, I want you to think about how we would say that. So first of all, we need to decide, is it a j'ai verb or is it a je suis verb? Is there any massive amount of movement involved in dancing? Was there dancing on the Casa diagram? And the answer is no. Now, some of you might be a bit confused here, but the reason is that you don't dance from Manchester to Stockport down the road. You might, let's say you go into a room, you go into a hall to do some dancing. You go into that hall, you dance around. Once you've finished, you come out of the hall. You haven't gone anywhere. You're still in the same location. You just danced around for a bit. So therefore, it's not a je suis verb. So the answer would be j'ai dansé. The verb to dance is danser with an R on the end. So you knock off the ER and you put an accent on the top. If you're a girl, you don't need an extra E on the end, because you only put the extra E on the end if it's a je suis verb. So here we've got I sang. The verb to sing is chanter, but you could really do with looking it up. I left is partir. I swam, the verb to swim is nager, N-A-G-E-R. But I encourage you to look it up. I gave is the word donner, D-O-N-N-E-R. I went up is the verb monter. We've already seen that today. To enter is entrer. I looked for is the verb chercher, C-H-E-R-C-H-E-R, chercher. I was born, that verb is that one's very regular though, so you might have to have a chat about that in a moment. And I washed is the last one. The verb to wash is laver, L-A-V-E-R. But we should try and look them up before we come up with the answers. So I'm just going to encourage you to pause it there and try and have a go at those questions. You should always think, the first question you always ask yourself is this a j'ai verb or is this a je suis verb? J'ai or je suis? Okay, let's have a look at some answers then. So first of all, I sang. So again, is this j'ai or je suis? There wasn't anyone singing on the Casa diagram. Singing does not involve movement. So therefore, once again, it's a j'ai verb, and the answer would be that. J'ai chanté with an accent on the E. Again, you don't need an extra E if you're a girl, because it's not a je suis verb. I left. Now, does leaving involve movement? Yes, it does. Is there anyone leaving on that Casa diagram? Yes, there was. In the bottom left corner, there's someone leaving. So this is going to be a je suis verb, because it does involve movement. It was on the Casa diagram. So therefore, the answer would be je suis parti. So partir, I've taken off the IR and I've put an I back on. And the reason the E is in brackets is because if you're a girl here, you would need to put an extra E on the end if you wanted to say I left. Je suis parti. Number 4, I swam. Now, I've deliberately included some of these verbs on here. Now, you might think swimming does involve movement, but it doesn't really. It's not on the Casa diagram, and it's not really a verb of movement from one place to another. You don't swim from to work in the morning. You don't swim from Manchester to Stockport. You might, for some people, quite rarely swim from Dover to Calais for charity. But that's like a very rare occasion. Normally, if you go swimming, if you think about it, if you go in the pool, you go down the steps, or you jump in, you swim up and down, you do a few lengths, and you get out, but you haven't gone anywhere. You're still in the same place. You just moved up and down the pool. If you go to the beach and you get up from your towel, you go for a swim around in the beach, in the sea, and then you come in from the sea and you go back to your towel, you haven't actually gone anywhere. You've not moved location. So that's why it's not really on the Casa diagram. So if you put je suis, I can understand why, but really the answer would be j'ai nagé, because it's not on the Casa diagram. Number 5, I gave. So again, is this a j'ai verb or a je suis verb? Always ask that question at the start. Now, if you give something to someone, that doesn't involve you moving. It might involve, for example, if I give a pen, I gave him a pen, then that would involve the pen moving, but it wouldn't involve me moving. So therefore, it's not on the Casa diagram, it's not a movement verb, and so therefore, it's just j'ai donné, I gave. No need for an extra E, because we only put an extra E on, girls, when it's a je suis verb. I went up. Was going up on that Casa diagram? Yes, it was. Does it involve movement from the ground to the top? Yes, it does. That's from one place to another. So, for example, if you were to say, I went up the Eiffel Tower, that involves you moving from the bottom to the top of the Eiffel Tower. So, therefore, it's a je suis verb. And it would be, je suis monté. I went up. And girls need an extra E this time, because we do add an E on to the je suis verbs. Number 7, I entered. Does that involve movement? Well, yes, it involves you being outside and then going inside. Was there anyone entering the Casa diagram? Yes, there was. So this is going to be another je suis verb. Je suis entré. And again, girls need an extra E. Number 8, I looked for. So again, is this a j'ai verb or a je suis verb? If you're looking for something, are you moving? Well, I suppose you could be, but if you're just sat at your desk and you're looking around your desk trying to find your pencil, then you're not moving, so it doesn't always involve movement. Plus, if you think about the Casa diagram, there was no one on the Casa diagram looking for anything, and so it doesn't really involve movement. So the answer would be j'ai cherché. I looked for. Can I just also say at this point, this isn't a perfect diagram, isn't a perfect explanation, it's just something that teachers use to try and help you to understand it. I know there's a bit of doubt here about whether there's movement or not, but if you think about the Casa diagram and you try and learn those words, those verbs, those movement verbs, then it should help you. Now, I was born. Now again, is there movement here? Well, no, not really, but there is a change from one location to another. You're going from not being alive in the world on your own to being alive on your own. So it was on the Casa diagram. There was someone being born on the Casa diagram. So therefore, it would start off with je suis. But we need to be careful here, because as you can see, the past participle is very irregular. You would say je suis né for a boy, and same for a girl actually, je suis né. But girls need to put an extra E on the end because it's a je suis verb. So this is an irregular one, and we need to look these up in a verb table and things, or just learn them, because I was born is a very useful verb. I was born in Stockport, I was born at Stepping Hill, I was born in England, I was born in February, I was born in summer, I was born in autumn, whatever. Je suis né en février, for example. And finally, I washed. And again, you should ask yourself always, is this a j'ai verb or a je suis verb? and in washing there's no real movement involved really from one place to another, so therefore it would be a j'ai verb. It's not on the cast diagram, there's not a lot of movement involved, so it's going to be a j'ai verb, and the answer would be j'ai lavé. I washed. J'ai lavé. So those are some answers. Again, we always should think this through. Again, look at all those words. They're all three verbs. Je ai dansé, 3 words. Je ai chanté, 3 words. Je suis parti, 3 words. So in French, it must be 3 words. If it isn't 3 words in French, then something's gone wrong, and you need to think about your answer. Look at the English. Most of the time, it's always 2 words. I danced, I sang, I left, I swam. Always 2 words in English. Usually 2 words in English, but 3 words in French. Okay.